The Business of Art, brought to you by the Video Department. Welcome to The Business of Art. I'm your host, Matt Polson. We are here with my new friend, Suzanne Vinson. Suzanne, it's a pleasure.
Such a pleasure.
We were introduced by the incredible Mark Goad, who we both know and love.
Who's incredibly incredible, right?
Yes.
Extremely.
He's the king of networking, as we like to say.
I agree completely.
So let's just start at the very beginning. Are you from Richmond originally?
I'm not. I'm actually from a little suburb of Jackson, Mississippi called Pearl.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up in Pearl?
I loved being outside, lots of nature all around, lots of play by myself because, there were acres around me with nobody near. But then going to school, it was pretty interesting, kind of simple, if you will. Racism wasn't completely blatant, but was certainly a part of things, which is one of the reasons I'm not there now.
Sure. And how small was the school that you went to?
Oh my gosh. I'll have to think about this for a second. I would say, well, this is fascinating because from second grade to 12th grade, I was in the same building and it kept expanding, but we would stay in the same building and the structure would you'd get grades here and there. I would say my graduating class was around 200.
Okay.
Maybe a little over.
Yeah. So yeah, that's not like teeny tiny, but not like here in the counties of Central Virginia.
No, nothing like that.
Yeah, it's about half as many people as I had in my graduating class, and that was before the county really started to explode. I went to Atlee, obviously, which is how I know Patrick.
Love that.
Yeah, my Latin teacher for 5 years. And interestingly, my wife went to Patrick Henry.
Oh.
Took 6 years of Latin. Didn't know Patrick. I call him JP. I almost said that. Didn't know Patrick, but Patrick knew her teacher. So we're all very connected.
Oh, I love that.
I
love that. Yes, it's a small world.
Richmond especially.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what age were you when you discovered you had a passion for art?
Oh my gosh. I think the earliest possible. The thing that I like to say is I grew up in a wisteria tree. My grandmother planted a wisteria vine, and you usually don't call them trees, but she shaped it and would cut it, and so that the center was really tree-like. And so I would be under it making mud pies, and I would pick every flower in the yard and then do what I would say is like a mandala now. You see the sand mandalas by the monks who are just creating these intricate pieces, and I would do them just with flowers and rocks and leaves and sticks. And as soon as I could, right, using paintbrushes and colors, whatever I had. My mom would paint. And so she was more like a seamstress, and my grandmother would quilt. So there was always something around that was getting made. And I would try my best at some of those things. I did 4-H. And so I wasn't in the animal husbandry. I was into the, construction. So making clothes, making jams and jellies, competing at the state fair with all of those. Very fun, so my hands were always busy, I think. And I would say, oh my gosh, I can remember my best friend in 7th grade, Rainey, shout out to you. We would spend, our slumber parties, like decorating all our notes, and then literally, have the borders made, collage, drawing, all of that, and then write notes back and forth artistically. It was really, really fun.
So interesting. Did you listen to Juliet's?
I did, and I realized as I'm saying, oh my gosh, she and I had that in common. Holy crap. Like, whoa.
There are so many common threads. I mean, this is going to be episode number 12.
Yes.
So thank you. I've only done 12 of these, but there are so many common threads already. It's kind of amazing.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I think we're just made a certain way, right? And that creativity just flows. Yeah. It just comes out. Yeah.
And depending on where you grew up and what your circumstances were, we probably all had pretty similar childhoods within a few degrees of each other.
Yeah.
But yeah. And so were there structured art programs that you participated in as a kid?
Yes. So back then, middle school was junior high, right? And so my 7th and 8th grade art teacher, Henry Banks, who's no longer with us, but he was amazing. he had a sign business in another city and then taught art as well. And so that was back, signs were hand lettered. And so he would have, like, on one side of a chalkboard, so-and-so for sheriff, you know, as he's working on that in his off periods. But he spent a lot of time with us showing us how to do hand lettering, how to space it out and make it the way we wanted to. I mean, I don't know many programs who do that because fonts are so ready on the computer, but he showed us how to create our own fonts. And I remember him having us pick from just a stack of photocopied papers, and you had to be able to mimic the font, like by the end of the week or by whatever the amount of time was. And I attribute a lot of that to me being so interested in hand lettering. I used to do calligraphy, and then I decided I just want to do it myself. I want to do what I want to do. And I like that it looks not like a computer generated it, right? So he was very instrumental. And then my senior year, I happened to change schools because I had some chronic health issues, and I was able to get out of school at noon every day, go home, take a nap, and then go to work at the plant nursery I worked at. And Michael Box, who is also no longer with us, may they both rest in peace, he was a watercolor artist of his own right outside of teaching. And so watercolor was a favorite medium, but I was really intimidated by it. But I loved seeing what he did and was very inspired by his work. In his class, he really pushed us to, you know, use our pencils the way that they're made, right? Not just writing, but turning them on their side and, you know, even using the broken pieces like you would a piece of charcoal. It was just so great. I loved the way they each nurtured me in school so that I learned, oh my gosh, I learned how to linocut. I learned how to use copper and do embossing on copper and then treat it with chemicals so that you get that beautiful patina. And so much of that ended up coming back into my art over the years that otherwise I'm self-taught. I have done some workshops at Visual Arts Center of Richmond, some back when it was the hand workshop, and it just helps me to see what potential is there. I would have loved to do art school, but that's not exactly the path I chose.
Well, how old were you when you were learning to do the copper and the lino cutting and stuff like that?
7th, 8th grade.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did you continue doing stuff like that throughout high school too?
No, I mean, I took a break from art classes. I don't remember why. My mom was a teacher in the high school as well. I think it was just the limits of how many electives you get, and you have to make a choice, and you have to take a language, which I took French. She told me I wasn't smart enough for Latin. So my husband, who is the Latin teacher and connected to Patrick and you by extension, right?
Yeah.
I wish that I had taken Latin, but that's okay.
Yeah.
He tells me it's not too late. I can learn.
I think you're probably good.
I know, right?
I think you're probably good.
Yeah. It's okay.
Doesn't seem very practical.
No.
Where did you go to college, or did you go to college?
I did go to college. I went to a small private university in Clinton, Mississippi. So 20 minutes from home, but felt like worlds away, called Mississippi College.
Okay.
So I actually got a business education degree, which was a business administration degree with an education minor. And then, and so there I only had one elective because of the structure of the program. And I ended up taking it in psychology, and then ended up doing a master's program there as well in a Master of Education in Guidance and Counseling. So it was a very formative time, and I worked, I loved it. I worked in the home ec department, in the office as my work study. Okay. And then they had a laboratory preschool. Mm-hmm. So I ended up helping in the preschool some, resetting the room every week, getting to organize all their art materials and, all the pom-poms and cut the tape and put it at the edge of the table. It was just really fun. I loved getting to see all of that. And then by the time I was in my master's program there, they hired me to cook and teach the afternoons for the preschool. So I got to really have my hands in a lot of art materials with the kids. And I stretched it a little bit because sometimes with children, you give them all the parts and you show them what it should look like, and then they do it their way. So you might have the snow person with the 3 circles, right, and the hat and the this and that. And I would actually just kind of give them a shape and a lot of materials and say, hey, let's create a little collage. What do you want to make? As opposed to the prefab, which both have places.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I was like, hey, I'm the afternoon teacher. We can roll after nap and do whatever we want. So
Do you enjoy working with kids?
I do. I've been able to do that over the years a good bit.
When did you end up coming to Richmond?
Oh, gosh, 2001.
Okay.
So right after my first grad program, I came here for a second as in a seminary, Baptist Theological Seminary, that is no longer in existence, but got a Master of Divinity Studies.
What was that seminary called?
Baptist Theological.
Oh.
BTSR is the short.
It was in Richmond? Mm-hmm. Where was it?
It was right across the street from Union Theological Seminary.
Gotcha. Is that in the north side area?
It is. Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
How long was that program?
Well, for me, I did it in 3 years. You could do it in 3 or more.
Mm-hmm. That's intense, though. That's a significant program.
It was.
Yeah. What was your goal with that?
Good question. To a certain degree, I'd been working in churches, working with children primarily, but then all ages at other points. And I felt called to that kind of work, right? To help people in that setting to heal and to know themselves better. Churches aren't always the easiest place to do that in. I feel like, every church has its own hope for their people. And I appreciate communities and churches. What I have found with the work I've done over the years is that my giftedness lies in helping people in bereavement settings, in times of grief. So I ended up doing chaplaincy work at VCU Medical Center, and then at Our Lady of Hope Health Center, I was their chaplain and pastoral care director for a period of time, and then have done some short stints like at Westminster Canterbury of Richmond, and it's really wonderful. I love all ages and stages of life, and have felt like I kind of ebb and flow with what the need is, if that makes sense. So right now, some of the work I'm doing is in perinatal loss, which means if a child who basically second and third trimester loss, whether it needs to be medically induced or as a spontaneous loss. And it's such a very particular stage of loss that you can't just show up to any support group for grief and get the same kind of care that you can in a very closed group where everyone in there knows exactly what it's like.
I have found that a church's personality is a direct reflection of the leader of the church. Mm. We've been to a few since I've been married. Mm-hmm. One that was, I'm trying not to say too much.
Yeah, I understand.
One that was, had been in my in-laws' family, like one that they've been going to, whatever, and for a while, and kind of, maybe I'll just say like kind of a darkness kind of came over the place, mm-hmm. I think, based on leadership. We started going to a different church. Mm-hmm. I'm proud to say Richmond First Baptist.
Oh, yeah.
And the leader of that church is phenomenal.
He is.
He's one of the best public speakers I've ever seen in my life.
He is.
It's uncanny how good he is.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've been really enjoying going there. It seems like a nice, warm, relatively diverse environment for the part of town that it's in.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's been good for us. I was raised Catholic, so it's new for me to be going to a Baptist church, but I like it. I like the change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you grow up Baptist?
I grew up Southern Baptist even.
Okay.
Yeah, which was rigid in its own ways,
yeah,
but also very loving.
Do you still identify with that denomination?
No. And they actually, it was like, was it 2 years ago? The Southern Baptist denomination doesn't really like women in leadership,
sure,
right? And they don't like women in ministry, especially. And so I guess it was 2 years ago, there were about 180 of us who were put on a list to say, we need to disavow these churches from the Southern Baptist Church. And our congregation that I was currently serving in full time, basically, we were not interested in being on their list and had asked to be removed from it numerous times, and they finally did. But it was just, it's like, okay, what does it matter? You know, I think, I don't know. The narrow-mindedness of some just really gets to me sometimes.
Yeah.
And of course, it's the inclusivity that I care more about. So I tend to just not ignore it, because I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's appropriate for us to ignore the people who are mistreating others or silencing voices that shouldn't be silenced, but to really lean in toward inclusivity and welcome. And I've been really proud of First Baptist and what has been happening. One of the ways First Baptist actually ministered to us is my daughter was at Fox Elementary when we had the school fire, and First Baptist opened the doors in no small way, right, to welcome the entire school and let us take over the building for a period of time while they were renovating the building at Clark Spring Elementary. So, yeah.
Absolutely incredible. Mm-hmm. Where is that status on Fox?
As far as I know, I mean, they're still renovating Fox, and if you drive by, you'll see incremental work because, you know, it has a roof now, but you can't really see what they're doing inside. But you can see workers there.
I feel like that's been going on for a long time.
Long time.
You would think that might be a priority, but I guess it is what it is.
I feel like, I don't know, I think the more of the building was damaged.
It was bad.
It was bad. And I think it's wonderful. And, you know, sometimes tearing down and starting over is probably easier than renovating and repurposing. And I think that's part of the length of time happening.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I told a story on the pod not too long ago about a person who was, I think they run a tree company. They had some land. There was a house on the land. They didn't want the house, but they decided to renovate it. And once they got through renovating it, the person was like, it would have been cheaper and faster to just tear this down and start from scratch. And they're like, well, we know now.
Exactly.
You just don't think, I mean, it doesn't make sense logically until you think about it and dig into it.
But of course, I want to be clear. I'm very much on the side of renovating and using what's there when you can, especially with historic buildings.
When you can, yes.
When you can.
With Fox, there's no question.
No question.
Yeah,
I leave it to them on the house, but I love old houses.
Sure, but you can imagine,
I can.
An old country house in the middle
pit.
of nowhere, just... he said it was just mold and termite damage, and it's like at that point, it's like, dang.
What do you do?
Yeah, you spend tens of thousands to remediate mold. It's like, well, maybe we just get new wood.
Maybe we just get new wood, yes.
So when did you, and if I'm skipping over anything important, please fill us in, but when did you start to professionalize your artistic practices?
Excellent question. Well, it'll take a little. So I was on a different church staff, and gosh, how long ago was that? So that was probably 2004 to 2007, and it was, and I wasn't satisfied with the bulletin covers that we would always have, so I started making art for the bulletin covers. And then I had been making jewelry and making art for friends and whatnot. But in that period of time, we lived in this old house, speaking of mold, that the church owned. And we were living in an intentional community. And I started having art shows with my friends, one who's a poet, another who took photography, another who's a potter. And we would just invite people in. And that's when we started doing it as, officially it's hobbyist income, right? But I started seeing where people really liked what I created. And I had taken some of those, and this goes back to 7th and 8th grade, right? I did block prints and had printed on, sometimes literally on 100 bulletins, and other times I would actually, scan it or take a photo and upload it to the computer. But yeah, I would say 2006 was when I started my Etsy shop back in the day.
Etsy was around in 2006?
Etsy was around, wow. Yeah. So I ended up doing that, eventually becoming part of the Richmond craft mafia. And
is that an actual name?
It is.
Okay.
It is. I don't think Richmond was the first to come up with it. It
Yeah.
might have been, DC or something, but different craft mafias in different cities. And so we would put on 2 shows a year, the Spring Pot of Being and the Handmade Holiday
Spring
Market.
Bada Bing sounds familiar. Where was it?
Well, we would do it at Artworks, Plant Zero, essentially, in the beginning.
Yep.
But I was not a founding member. I jumped in at a later point. But boy, I learned a lot about how much goes into those events. And that's with a team of 8 to 12 people, depending on the timing.
Which is a pretty big team.
Yeah, pretty big team. So, so I don't know. I think it was really in that relationship context where people would say, hey, can you make this for me? I've got this gift coming up. And it was consistent enough. And I started it so I could basically pay for my supplies, because we know art supplies involve a pretty penny here and there. And I just wanted it to add to the life that I was living and not take away with the expenses. And so, it just grew from there. And it took until, I would say, I stuck primarily, I did a lot with, we're going to jump backward in time too, to my grandmother. I would do these concentric circles in fabric and hand stitch every one. And some would be little pins you could wear in your hair or on your dress or whatever. And I would sell those at the farmers markets. I had jewelry and I had the block prints.
I was going to ask you if you were doing farmers markets during this time.
Yeah. South of the James was my go-to. And then I would do, what else would I do? Oh, the 17th Street farmers markets where I started.
Is that even, do they do that anymore? Yeah.
No,
and now
gone.
South of the James still exists, but now the big one is the Bryant Park one. Do you ever do that?
No, I haven't. No, I got out of it at a certain point.
Sure.
You know, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it's one thing when you have one kid, hot and sweaty work. One thing when you have one kid, it's a different thing when you have 2 and you're older. And so I just switched gears. And when I started doing more, the last church I was in, I served for 6 years. And so, if you have the income, you don't have to do that kind of thing.
It's mostly for people who, with metaphorically, their back up against a wall. Like that's how they're earning their income, and good on them,
Well, especially if you're not doing consignment or wholesale too. So that's part of the evolution of the work was that with Etsy and the Richmond Craft Mafia, there was one point we were invited to the, I'm not going to remember, basically a wholesale buyer's market. And we traveled one year to Philly, and we did it in Baltimore another year. And they were very generous to us to give us this little section of Etsy shops that were basically founding, like on the foundation level of their wholesale business. And so I learned from these folks, and I can't tell you which buyer's market it was because I just don't even remember. But, a $1,200 booth might have been $200 for us. It was glorious.
Yeah.
And so I started doing wholesale then, creating line sheets and learning how to market in that way, which was great.
So does that mean that you had products in that store in Philadelphia? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it was like the whole Philadelphia Convention Center with a lot of booths.
Gotcha.
And then buyers would come in and basically say, I want to do an order with you. And then you'd get to be in their shop. And so I did, I can't tell you how many orders I got. Not a ton, but enough to make you feel like, oh my gosh, this was worth it. I just,
How many different shops were you in after that? Approximately.
I mean, between 5 and 10.
That's awesome.
I would say, but hey,
that's
exactly.
Incredible. Yeah.
Right? And once you're in a few, you can say, hey, I'm in these.
Yeah.
And then people take you
of course.
more seriously. And
yeah.
once you hear, okay, yes, this is working for me.
There's a certain momentum involved.
Yeah. Yeah. And you feel like, oh, I'm a legit artist now. Yeah. It was great. One of my favorites, I would hear from the proprietor. She had, I want to say it was in Seattle. And she would tell me what her customers, how they would experience my art and what they would pick and buy. And so I loved learning that you can have a relationship with your retailers such that you can say, okay, well, what if we try this product? Or what if we do it this other way. And so
John Price, you mentioned you know John, or do you not?
I don't think so.
Artist. Are you over at the Crossroads Art Center?
I used to be and need to be again.
Yeah. I was just over there yesterday. I didn't know because he's over there, but I mean, there's so many people over there. But
oh, yeah.
He said that artists need to create art for the marketplace if they wish to be professional. And I think that's what you're saying, is like you had people saying, this is what customers want.
Yeah.
And it's not so much, and his point was, it's only by doing that you then can afford and have the free time to do the art that you want.
Yes.
But you have to make it for the marketplace first, if you want to be a professional.
First or alongside, right?
Correct.
Right. And
first or alongside.
And I think for me, it's been an alongside process because
Sure.
I don't always pay attention to what the market needs. If I were to say what's a weakness, I would say it's that.
Yeah.
Like I get so ingrained in what I'm doing and the world around me that I'm looking at it from a different perspective, not necessarily income driven, dare I say, but more of a, okay, what's the collective unconscious need right now? And so it might not be the thing that's fitting the Pantone color of the year, or I mean, you'll hear things like that. If you can get in on what's happening in trends, right? That's what you want to do. I rather like to think I'm looking at what's going to be the next trend without realizing it. I can't say I'm always there, but I'm going for like kind of the heart and soul.
Sure. Yeah,
So-
YouTubers and like comedians who have heavy video presence have videographers on retainer for when stuff happens. Like, just say, for example, a big thing happened in the news, a really
Yes.
bad thing happened last weekend or a couple weekends ago, and they have a video made within 48 hours. And like, that's the whole point, is like, they're
Yes.
just waiting for something, and then they want to be the first ones to get that out. Little different with, that's video,
Yeah.
which is in its essence, like the whole game is virality to a certain degree. It's virality on one hand and consistency on the other. Like, those are sort of the two paths for video. But with art, it's a little bit different because, like you said, and I think John kind of said this too. So he also has a book. He, I think, painted the presidents, and I'm not sure exactly what happened with the book, but he said, like, the first year it came out or whatever, it was like, oh, okay, like this was okay, but it's kind of been consistent over the years. And that's what you don't think about. It's like with art, what you're making, especially if it's something that can be mass produced, like a book or a print or something like that, it's like, oh yeah, yes, you sell a painting one time for $2,000, but what if you sell a $20 print 500 times?
Exactly.
That's and it's less work. And that's I think what is part of the point of this podcast is to have people like you who have stories of how they ended up becoming professionals in their industry, but then also, the little tips and tricks and business things that you might not ever think about as an artist.
Yep.
That's really what I'm interested in. So take us from your burgeoning Etsy and everything's going on. How do you move into one of the next two things that I know that we're going to talk about, which is either the book or your counseling therapeutic profession?
Gosh, this is almost that do it first or do it alongside, right? Because they go hand in hand. So I guess I'll start with the book. So
You can point it towards the camera.
Broken Wide Hole. I wrote this. I told myself at one point, I'm going to write a book by the time I'm 40. Well, 40 comes and I hadn't. So I decided, well, it's my goal. I'm just going to shift it slightly and say I'm going to do it in my 40th year.
There you go.
And I had been writing the prose essentially and poetry of it for a while and had been doing the art. And some of the art, I don't know how well folks can see, but essentially, it's prayers and art that I was using to pray or to process. So I did bereavement work for over 12 years, but I did that as I was doing the artwork, as I was doing church-based ministry, as I worked in a nonprofit. I mean, my gosh, this is pre-kids, right? And so I had so much more energy. and I realize now, oh, there's some adult ADHD going on here too. But the work for me was letting out the emotions that I was experiencing while witnessing really difficult times for others, and then also going through difficult times myself. So with my own chronic health issues, and then dealing with depression and anxiety over the years, writing is one of the ways I cope. And writing and creating, and often it's one or the other at a given moment, and then it became both. So that just kind of putting these together. And then Valley Haggard, who started Life in 10 Minutes, helped me just kind of coach me through, okay, so we're going to do this intuitively. And she's like, okay, what are the pieces that you've written that really speak to you, that you feel like others could benefit from? And so I pulled all those together. And then we sat in the floor of my old studio, and I pulled out the art that spoke to me. So she'd hold up each piece of writing that I'd done, and I would take the art that I felt like connected to it, and then I would assemble them. And then I went home in my backyard. I mean, this is what you'd never expect, right? And I created a circle, and I've mentioned I love circles. And I just took those pieces, and then I did the order of my book, literally covering the grass in my backyard. And I would just go around the circle and read and look, and ended up going, okay, here it is. And then the thing as an artist and business person, one of the things I've learned over the years, and then personally, is to ask for help when you need it. And so I was connected through Valley with Lou Ellen, who helped me do the graphic design of the book itself. So I could turn it over to her. She chose a beautiful typeface that was once in some sacred text, and she would bring it back to me, and I would make changes or edits and send it back to her. And so then we have this beautiful product in the end that came from me, but then exists on its own. So that I have people who still, so that was why 2018.
When it was published.
When it was published. Let me make sure I'm right. Which should be in here. Yep, 2018. And it was Llewellyn Hensley who helped me with the graphic design. So people still buy it, and they'll do little book clubs. And I've got women who, and not just women, but one group of women who will tell me that they each have a copy, and they'll text each other, read this today. And so all of them are reading the same page at the same time, and then they have a dialogue about it or talk about where they are in life. And it just gets me in the heart. I'm like, oh, that just makes me so happy.
It's really powerful.
It is. And so I've been working on 2 different books at the same time in the last year. And I just need to get my act together and finish.
Are they similar in approach?
One is, one's not.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
One will lead us into the other conversation, which is more based around the counseling components. So with the bereavement work I do, one of the ways that it's different is that I integrate guided meditation and that I've created, and then bring people into a space of imagery that way, so that they don't start with a blank piece of paper or a blank project idea. I give them the opportunity to come up with words, images, colors, textures, sensations within that they can then put into writing or art, mark making even. And so
Mark making?
What's which that? Different artists call it. I mean, I'm not the one to come up with this, but essentially I believe everybody can make a mark, whether it's a line, a circle, a shape. And once you make a few marks, you've made a pattern. And once you make a pattern, it can become something else. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if you've said it yourself, if you've been around people who say, but I'm not creative, I'm not artistic, I can't do this. I'm like, you can make a mark, right? Mm-hmm. You can do a tick mark. You can do anything. And so one of the practices that art therapists and that I use is to say, okay, breathe in, make a mark. Breathe out, make a mark, and continue. And it becomes this very sweet, mindful practice of just taking that moment to pause, breathe in deeply, breathe out deeply, and make a mark. And it can become almost, I'll use the word meditative. And so the other opportunity it does, I think, is to clear your mind, right? And you kind of, it's not like you're erasing your thoughts, but you're giving your thoughts time to settle, because our brains are constantly in motion. Our minds do what they do. They come up with ideas and they question, and sometimes the negative thoughts rise to the surface. But if you can get your hands on a pencil, pen, highlighter, whatever it is, make a mark and do that for enough time, you're kind of clearing the space for something fresh. So it's like a warm-up activity too. If you're, if it's time to set your goals for the week and you just can't think of what to think of first, make some marks on paper and then try it again, or take a walk,
Would you say this is akin to art therapy?
I would say I think so, but I haven't studied art therapy directly. I've just been witness to it at different points, and I do think it's probably akin.
How did you create this process? Is it just from your experience and seeing what worked?
Combos, yeah. In the church work, I was doing it, for vacation Bible schools, for instance, or teaching a Sunday school with kids, or hanging out with them in the church service, right? And so it's just part of how I roll. If I'm in a room where I'm listening, it helps me to doodle or draw. And I think there are a lot of us out there like that. If you looked back at any of my school notebooks or symposium kind of events, you're going to see like imagery. And there's research to connect that with improving our memory, or I think there are even terms for it and how you visually study. But combining, so with my business ed degree, like the education classes, I was learning how to help reach children, reach adults, or, it was really secondary and early elementary. But I often find the work I was doing with the preschoolers, the work I was doing with young people in the church, if I would get the adults to do those kind of activities, I would say, hey, let's reach back to those moments in our earliest years. And I know some of us have trauma from what teachers have told us, like, you can't draw a straight line, or that's not art, stay inside the lines. There's a lot of that needs healing. And just debunk it. It's not true. You don't need to carry that old story. And there are a lot of really severe old stories we carry all the time. And so, I don't know, it just kind of frees us to go outside of the norm of what we have to deal with every day.
And how did you turn this into a business?
Well, I will give credit to, oh my gosh, names are escaping me right now, but one of the first bereavement groups I did with VCU was with a fellow chaplain and friend, Reverend Dr. Ann Charlescraft, and she used a business called Living Well, and they would bring art forms into the bereavement setting. So I remember a series where, and it was more intricate. Like they would have, I can't remember, I think Japanese culture was one. And so they had these like, we're going to make samurai helmets out of paper kind of thing. And it was to like strengthen ourselves. There was like a lot of meaning in it. And so they would do that with the groups. And I was helping with them and doing children's support and the preschool support. So that was one way I saw it done, but I felt like it was missing a piece, and the guided meditation is what I felt like it was missing. Like being on the chaplain side, I'm always thinking about what is the inner landscape that we don't see that's needing to be shaped or needing to be cared for. And so the way I started doing it as a business, right, was to, I was contracted with Ann eventually because Living Well, they moved outside of Richmond. And so I started doing the bereavement group facilitation and writing a new curriculum, and really loved it so much. Eventually Ann left for a different hospital system, and I tried to still work, but with transitions in leadership. It just didn't continue in the same way. And it took us a while to have our second child. And so it was nice to step away from some of that for myself and focus a little differently. The other piece, right, with church work is like you're working with a lot of ages. And I began to see how bereavement is just, there are times when you need a bereavement cohort, like a bereavement support group, but bereavement's everywhere. Like grief is everywhere. People are losing jobs, they're losing dreams, they're, dealing with changes in relationships. And so I started doing more retreat-based work so that I was doing support for just anyone. And in my old studio, it was 400 plus square feet. And so I would have circles every month that I called creativity circles. And people would come as they were, and I would set the table and have a creative project for the evening. I would have the guided meditation, I would have poetry, and I would just basically facilitate the experience. And whoever gathered around the table was always just right, the people who were meant to be there. And they would bring their own people in so that, I reacquainted with one and recently, and we were remembering fondly those days because one of the women was going through cancer treatments, essentially, and eventually died. And we were just thinking about how wonderful it was that she brought her people together in that context. She said, I think she was preparing us to be without her, but we had this time together with you that was so special. And I was like, thank you. That's wonderful. And we end up reconnecting as I'm leading their church women's retreat earlier this year. So that was really, really wonderful. So it's all, it's all about relationships and connecting. So there's a point, I think I'm getting a little lost in my words, but I would say the networking piece is there. You know how a lot of people hear about folks with word of mouth. I've relied on that for years. Going back to single church ministry and doing that full time took away some of the networking that I had done. I didn't stick with it quite the way I should have probably.
Are you still back? Are you in ministry now?
Not in the same way. I have started a Substack called The Art of Ministry. Oh gosh, listen to me. The ministry of art. I actually debated on which way to go, but it's really the ministry of art that I focus on right now. Ministry itself is art, and many of us are in caring professions. It doesn't have to be working in a church, and most often it's not. But people need to be nurtured in churches and those communities so that they can then go out and care and serve the world around them and build these inclusive spaces for people to be who they are.
Does your retreat business have a name?
It's really under me. My years ago, Silver Tree Art is essentially the silvertreeart.com is the website. Folks are like, what's that name about? When I was doing jewelry, it made a little more sense because silver was the what I used, sterling silver. And then I love trees, and I would say it's the many branches of my art, right? And a few of us were trying to do a collective. So it was going to be Silver Tree Art Collective. But then life changed in a hurry, and I still wanted to do it. So I just dropped collective and stayed with Silver Tree Art. So I've done Silver Tree Art by Suzanne Vinson, and I have a friend who's a naming consultant, and I have talked with her over the years, but it's hard changing a name. Well, you'll know. I mean, it's hard changing a name when you've had it for so long and people know you by it. So,
we changed to the video department in the last 3 years because the previous name did not have that recognizability. We were at a place in our business where it just wasn't like, I didn't think anybody would care.
Yeah.
And we were shifting our focus. Like you said, things changed. Like my focus was shifting to small businesses. So that's why we changed it to the video department. But yeah, I mean, there's so many great nuggets of wisdom in your story. What advice do you have for aspiring artists who want to do it for a living?
Oh, I love that. One of the things that I really believe in is to figure out what is your story and to tell it. And, some people might call it the elevator spiel. I think it's a little bit more than that. But what is it you want to be doing? We'll talk about it because that's what you're doing. Your intent is there. Your focus is there. So I am a watercolor artist. I am a business owner. I am who are you? Not, I'm trying to be, right? Be that from the get-go and own it and then share it with everybody, right? And then I think that level of confidence and clarity really helps. And the beauty is you don't have to be 100% confident because you can change your story as you go because like we said, right? Life happens and things shift and maybe you get clarity by practicing. Yeah. And it's great to, it depends on where you are, but I can't think of any artist who doesn't benefit from a website, a portfolio, online.
Finding a collective or starting one. Being a part of a larger group. Like going back to Crossroads Art Center. I love what Jenny Kirby has done in that space. It's incredible.
And it is. I had a wall in there way back when and had a little shop front up in the front. And it's been a while since I haven't, but I'm at a place now where I'm like, I need that kind of support again because I can't rely on being present to welcome folks into the studio all the time. I can't be open 24/7. Not that she is, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so having those kinds of supports is really important too. And so I guess befriend risk would be another piece of advice. Because it's scary, right? When you're first beginning, it's exciting, but that excitement can be a little daunting. But risk is an important friend because you need to.
Without it, there's no reward.
Try it, right? Exactly.
Literally. That's the saying is the saying. No risk, no reward. It's sayings like that stick around for a reason.
Exactly.
One other lesson that I have heard from your story, which is similar to mine as well, which is your art was never your sole focus. It was never the only thing you were doing. You were doing ministry work. There were so many other things that you were doing. And I don't remember what actor said it, but the gist is if all you do in your life is act, if the only thing you're doing is being in the theater or being on set, what are you drawing from? What experience are you drawing from?
Yes.
And I worked in the theater for a long time, but when I was very young, I was probably like 20, I recognized that I was not going to earn a living as an actor. And so I learned how to video edit. I was doing a summer camp. An opportunity came up, like, hey, we're doing like a Hollywood themed camp. We want to make some movies. Are you interested? I taught myself everything.
Oh my gosh.
And here we are now, almost 20 years later. And I didn't know that this was going to be my profession, but it's only because I knew I have to do something else.
Yeah.
And it has informed so much. I became a better actor because I am a video editor.
Yes.
I am a much better director because I'm a cinematographer. There's so many things where it's just like and now you and I both, I feel like, are in these positions where we're almost kind of like unicorns. Like we have this unique skill set, and it's like that's a good place to be as an artist, is like where you're sort of positioned uniquely. And it sounds like you, especially, you almost kind of created your own genre in a way. It
felt like it as it was happening. I'll be real.
Yeah, it really does.
I've been a part of a Young Clergywomen International organization back when it was started and then on. And once you're 40, you're gently told you're no longer young enough to be part of it. It's for a good reason. So now I'm in the alumni group. But that was such an important networking group for me. It was pivotal in the way I do my work. And like you said, right, being a video editor made you a better actor. Well, being a minister makes me a better artist in terms of seeing the need and then creating something that meets the need. So that
and vice versa, being a better artist makes you a better minister.
Absolutely, right? Being a well-rounded human, right, and not just pigeonholing yourself, perhaps, or saying, "But I can only do this." It's not about pigeonholing necessarily, but it's just about letting yourself expand as you grow and learning who you are amidst that growth, I think. So that I had another thought for like up and coming artists, and here I am. It'll come back to me in a minute, I think. It's gone. But that's okay. I mean, there's learning along the way. The other thing is, anytime people ask me for support or help, I try to offer it. So I've got someone I'll talk to on Thursday morning, and I think it'll be fun because I always learn, like from this conversation, right? This is giving me a lot of energy and life just by having it. And so asking people you admire or people you're really curious about, like this, having those kind of conversations and saying, hey, can I learn from you? You know, why not? People ask me, hey, who are your production partners? Like who produces your prints? And I print a lot myself now, but I will throw it out there like Cut, Creative, Julie and Sean are amazing. They do lots of really big vinyl projects, like on the Contemporary Art Museum, like the vinyl on the outside of the windows, and they do a lot for VMFA. But they're so generous and kind. You know, they produce a number of my vinyl stickers. And then Bamboo Ink is my favorite printer in town. They are so kind and generous. And whereas one printer years ago said to me, "You're not our bread and butter," that I have not been back to them and won't, because maybe I'm not your bread and butter, but I want to feel like I am. And so hopefully we give every customer we have that kind of experience where you matter. And I thank you for being one of my clients, you know? So little experiences like that along the way help me see how to care and nurture those really important relationships, because you do not know when they're coming back and how they're going to be influencing you and others.
You never know. That one person you're doing a favor for hires you to do the biggest project of your life. You never know.
Oh my gosh, you never know. Yeah. And it's just good to be kind.
Yeah. Even if you don't believe in karma, like just
Right?
err on the side of
You're on the side of
caution.
kindness and caution. That's right.
Be kind.
Be kind.
Suzanne, it's been a pleasure. How can people find you and find your work and potentially purchase something from you?
Oh, please do. Find me at silvertreeart.com. I also have my website, which is SuzanneLVinson.com. And then my Substack is The Ministry of Art. And one thing I'll mention is that with Silver Tree Art, I have membership levels. And the way I do that is, gosh, we've all learned so much from COVID and post-COVID. And I actually learned very, very small amounts of video production in producing segments for worship online. And I'm putting that to use with my my membership offerings are all around creativity and mindfulness. And it's a wonderful opportunity to jump in, and there's an online art gallery, and I have meditation, library, and offerings for my membership. I also do a weekly soul care newsletter where I'm offering mindfulness tools and tips, and art downloads, ways to just really nurture that inner landscape in the ways that feel welcome.
And where can people sign up for that?
silvertreeart.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Incredible. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you all.